Ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching. Oh, let me move my microphone over. Ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching. This is another episode of InfoSec Unplugged. I am your host, Davin Jackson. Thank you for joining. Today's episode I've been looking forward to for a long time. We've been trying to get on each other's schedules probably for the better part of a year. But I am super excited to have my guest here today. But before I do that, I just want to again tell everybody thank you for joining the show or supporting the show. Thank you for supporting me and everything. You see, I got my Alpha Esports and Technology shirt on. But had a lot going on in the last week. Been working out of the center. So if you've seen that on social media, you'll see I had some stuff up. And I also celebrated my birthday. So we're gonna go ahead and do that for myself. Hit the big 4-0. So you know, feeling feeling great. Knees achy a little bit, but hey, it is what it is. Like I said, but again, thank y'all for joining, and thank you for the well wishes and the birthday wishes and everything. So I wanted to just kind of get that out of the way. So tonight, my guest is a busy man. He is a manager of security engineering at a big name company. I won't say the name. I'm gonna let him say the name if he wants to. But he's, with everything going on with, all the conferences starting to ramp up, he was able to kind of spend some time with me and chop it up. So ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching, please welcome my guest. Actually, hold on, because I was about to spoil it. I done had it in here and everything. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest, Charles Nwatu. And we're going to bring him in here and give him a round of applause. Thank you,
What's up,
sir.
everybody?
Yes. Again, thank you. I see everybody in the chat. Thank you with the well wishes and the happy birthday wishes. And yes, thank you, Charles, also for the happy birthday wishes. But go ahead and introduce yourself, because it's not about me right now. It's about you. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. I know we've been trying to get on our calendars. I think it's actually been more than a year. I think it's about 2 years. But my name is Charles Nwatu. I have the privilege and luxury of leading out security governance and assurance at Netflix. My background, I'm traditionally trained in detection and engineering and incident response. Have worked at companies such as LinkedIn and building out incident response, Twilio, Stitch Fix, and now more recently here at Netflix. Thoroughly enjoy the information security field. Love talking about it. I think some of the things I like to do for fun. I'm an avid music collector. I got a whole stack of vinyls, like literally right next to me over here. I was just playing Bruno Mars. So I'm definitely a music lover, and just looking forward to breaking bread, having a conversation with y'all today.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. So, I hold on. I'm gonna give you another round of applause because that is a hell of a resume. that is a hell of a resume. For one, Netflix, Twilio, LinkedIn, like you kind of jumped all over it in the startup space, man. So that's amazing. For other reasons that I won't put out publicly, but but again, with that being said, thank you for joining, and congratulations on all your success. Before we even go ahead and get started, I'm gonna give you your flowers now, but I really wanted to get you on the show because you actually have an interesting origin story, and just your background in general, and how you take those steps to kind of help people is definitely inspiring. But again, I'm not going to be the one to talk about it, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and give your origin story. What got you started into the tech field, and how you came up.
Yeah. So how I came up. So the first time, actually, take a step back. I wanted to be a nurse. I thoroughly enjoy helping people, and so I grew up like wanting to be a nurse. I just loved the fact of being able to help people get back in a good place. And my mother was a nurse, and she always talked about the good of helping people. And then they'll say, okay, so then how do I transition into this whole security and tech space? Well, my father once came home with a Radio Shack Tandy computer. And I looked at this thing and I was just like, holy smokes, like, what is this? Like, my brother and I We played with it, we took it apart, we put it back together. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't after the fact, but I was so like enthralled about like what is this like computer stuff. And then decided to go to school for information systems. I had the pleasure of attending a university, Penn State University, at the University Park campus, and it just sort of continued my desire and thirst to sort of learn more about computers, networking. Incident response was really a thing that really intrigued me because of just the nature of all the back and forth of all the things you see across a business. And then in my junior year at being at Penn State, I received a scholarship from the DoD for their Information Assurance Scholarship Program, and that sort of changed my trajectory around like what I wanted to learn, even addition, more so on the lines of, well, how do all the pieces of security work together to secure an enterprise or secure an environment? So I did 2 more years of study in that domain, and then went into the federal government. I had a chance to work for DISA, the Defense Information Systems Agency. Um, did a lot of work doing incident response. Had some work on a host-based security program that they were running at the time, um, leveraging tools like um, McAfee and Enterprise and things like of that nature. Really, really loved that work. And then one day got challenged by one of my superiors. He basically said, "Hey, no, you're too young to be in the government forever. Like, go out and like in industry and learn things." And so that's when I started to cast the net and basically say, "Okay, let me see what else is out there." So I had a chance to work for McAfee, do some consulting, doing security in banks and in hospitals, and then from there decided to make the transition out to the Bay Area, working for LinkedIn, working for great managers throughout my career, from Corey Scott to Colleen Coolidge to my current director and VP Vitaly Gudinet. So I've had the luxury of learning from great leaders to also model the type of leadership style that I would hope that my teams would want to embody in their future careers. So that's my origin story in terms of how I started, coming from, wanting to be a nurse. I even got a minor in health informatics, and then where I am today.
No, that's interesting. I mean, it still is in the realm of helping people, but I guess moving. I mean, that when you talk about it, I mean, because medical is probably one of those fields that is like it's its own insulated world. So to jump from that world into this world, which is another super insulated world, and then you going, basically transitioning in those while in cybersecurity. So going from like insulated to insulated, that's definitely interesting, and I'm going to talk to you about that a little bit later. But but I also find it very interesting that you actually had somebody in the military who told you, you're still young, live your life and go out, basically go out and prosper, whereas most of us who served or dealt with it was kind of like, nah, you stay here and do the 20. So so that was, that lucky you, for that. And just having the wherewithal to kind of venture out and have that, because like I said, I was in the service, but my job wasn't transferable. I was a fighter jet mechanic. So it's not like I can go out and say, I'm gonna go work at F-16s at the local airport. But but talk about a little bit about that transition, that initial transition from medical to tech, or medical to cyber. Was there anything that was like transferable, or anything that from the medical field that helped you make that transition a lot easier? Because I know some people struggle when coming from something that's like not technical into a world that's like highly technical.
I would say my experience is probably more along the lines of like just being able to have conversations with folks. That idea of like, how do you connect with people, how do you communicate, how do you talk, how do you elicit insight? I think that's a transferable skill no matter what domain. Now the particulars in terms of the subject matter expertise changes as you start to build your knowledge base, but I think overall the transition from like the medical background into like a tech background, I think one of the things that I took pride in was that my ability to relate with people and sort of connect pieces. So I would believe like one of my superpowers is being able to like see the board and connect dots. And whether that's in like a healthcare background or in a systems based or an IT systems based background, like being able to see the big picture and where possible do the drill down into the lowest like atomic unit, I think it's something that I love doing. And the challenge of doing that, whether that's in security, medical, finance domains, like I think it exists all the way around. So having the passion and the desire to do that like level of work and that level of reading, the level of like training and education, like it just fed into me. So the transition was just applying the same skills, just in a different problem set. And so like, since I love tackling problems, like, oh, okay, I can use this tool, maybe a little differently, but I can get a different outcome. And I just started layering on top of that.
You know, that's interesting. I never thought of, and I guess I probably should have now that I think about it. I never thought of basically the medical field being like analytical, right? Because for me, one of the things I tell, like even with the younger mentees, is like, you know, you not necessarily that you don't have to be super analytical, but you kind of, it's almost like you kind of have that itch, like you called it a superpower, right? I call it the itch, where it's kind of like you start looking at things when you want to get into hacking and pen testing and stuff. There's always that itch in the back of your brain where it goes, yeah, this is what it's supposed to do, but what if I did this, you know, or you started to tinker. I have another Charles Scherer on the show. We talked when we had him on a couple weeks ago, and we talked about how for us, it started with like video games and tinkering around with devices, right? So with video games, you know, being able to play the games that were from Japan and on the American systems, and how we were able to, you know, mess around it with those stuff. So it's like having that analytical brain to go, okay, like you said, look at the bigger picture, and then being able to do the drop downs. I guess, you know, I guess that does make sense with the medical field. So now you come, okay, so you make that transition,
Mm-hmm.
and then you move into your initial job. You said was incident response.
Yeah, incident response in the DoD.
Okay, so now you were doing incident response for the DoD, and then you took on another role, and now you said you deal with governance, right?
Yes.
So now talk about that, because now those are also, I mean, I could see where the pieces get put together to kind of make those transitions, but usually most people, when they get into a certain field, they stay siloed, right? So
Yeah.
like usually incident response usually stays with incident response, or they might do a little bit of threat detection, right? Or pen testing. Damn, now that I think about it, you don't really go too many places after pen. From pen testing, you go to teaching pen testing or managing a pen testing team, right? But talk about that again, having that presence of mind, or that sense, that analytical sense to go, okay, you know what, I'm here, but now let me go see what's over here, and then move to these different realms. Because again, you're in governance, you know, they always say GRC is its own world, you know, and opposed to everything else. So talk about that transition as well.
Well, yeah, definitely. I've grown to appreciate and love the GRC space. But taking it a step back, like the reason why incident response, detection engineering, and threat intel excited me so much earlier in my career was that there are so many incidents that you can walk through, and the tactics, techniques, procedures that people used in terms of doing their exfiltration or their compromises is just intriguing. I wanted to read about all the exploits, all the things, to see like how do you become a better blue teamer. I don't know, as a defender, my mindset is like, you know, I have to be right all the time. In the challenge space of how am I right in an enterprise? How do I get the signals with the systems that we've deployed or the things that we're building to ensure that we can, decrease the amount of time between initial infection in terms and in response? Like that excited me. Even being on call excited me. Like all that was just invigorating. But then, pager duties at 2-3 in the morning start to get old after a time, and my life was changing, and family, married, got kids, and it's like, man, this ops flow, man, it's really taxing after a while. So I went into more of the enterprise security and how do you do security for your endpoints, DNS security and things of that nature, which was like a natural progression coming out of the IR space. Like, well, how do you do this for the corporate or the enterprise side? So thoroughly love there. my transition to GRC actually happened while here at Netflix. And I'm not gonna lie, like I said, I came to love GRC, but in the beginning, I was like, oh man, you know what they say about GRC people, they ain't technical and all that other stuff. And then, me buying into those biases, I came in and said, wow, you know what? This feels pretty damn cool. There's a lot that's happening in GRC that enables the business to actually perform better. And there are ways to incorporate engineering and security engineering practices that support compliance, governance, risk, and assurance. And I'll even make this comment, like I'm actually against GRC. I'm actually for this concept of GRC plus A, and the A being assurance, right? Because I always hear about my GRC experiences, like the checklist approach and everything else, but how do I gain assurance that this GRC is actually operating the way it's supposed to be? And so I've come to love GRC like 10 times over, because it allows me to speak in a way that's broader than just security. Like, I have conversations with my finance folks. I work with some of our enterprise management team or audit committee members. And so part of that story is, well, how do you take the atomic unit of risk and apply it in security? How does that show up in pen testing? How does that show up in our vulnerability management strategy? How does that show up in our incidents and the incident cost per person when we're running those playbooks and trying to resolve these cases? All those data and metrics paint a story about the health and state of our security program. How do I then take that security program and talk about it to the larger business in terms of how we're adding value and demonstrating impact? Like, that is a very technical skill set in terms of understanding all these different security domains, being able to synthesize it for various audiences who may not have the level of depth or the body of knowledge in security to be able to take that component and then talk broadly about it to the business population, or even just the population in general. So I am thoroughly in love with the idea of governance and policies and procedures, compliance control and compliance engineering, risk quantification, and putting dollars and values to the things that cause us to go bump in the night. And then the assurance elements around, like, how do we test inequality around that work? So like, I'm on the whole GRC plus A train. Like, I thoroughly love GRC, and I'm like, wow, I wish I would have gotten into it sooner. And I want to dispel the belief that it's not technical, because it is a highly technical component field that supports the growth and development of a security organization and the business.
Okay, so hold on, we're just gonna go ahead and where we gonna find this? What we gonna do? We gonna but no, thank you for that answer, because I mean that's even more than I kind of knew. And yes, my initial bias or my initial belief is that GRC isn't highly technical, because it deals with more of the governance, risk, and compliance stuff. And we probably should have started with what is governance and what, and all of that, and how does that play into the overall cybersecurity. But I think you kind of explained that very, very eloquently, sir. So thank you for that. But one thing that I did catch while you were talking about it is, like, based off of how you're saying it, it sounds like even if it's not as technical as, let's say, a pen testing thing, it sounds like there's a lot involved in that, right? So I always looked at GRC as, yes, it might not be technical, but you literally have to kind of know all the realms.
Yeah.
So now talk about the difficulty, or for my own, let's use me as an example. I'm a pen tester. I'm that's been my thing pretty much day one since I stepped foot into the world of cyber. And now I want to transition. You know what? I just don't have the urge to be on pen test paloozas anymore. Back to back pen test puppy mills. How would I then go about getting the knowledge to then transition into something like a governance or GRC plus A, as you put it?
So I want to rephrase the question just a little bit. So I want to add this. So your expertise as a pen tester allows you to understand the controls for which you're either breaking or attempting to dispel or break down. Like, so you have an understanding, like, I understand that there's perimeters in terms of like firewall and networking. I understand that there's application-based things. So you already know that there are things that you're looking for to be part of either the network design or the application and system design. Those things that you're looking for, to me, I call them like controls. And those controls are states. And I think the world of quality assurance is where I'm starting to love this blend of, okay, well, if you're doing an analysis of all the applications you're running, you probably have a checklist of things that you always check. Those things to me are like the control evidence and control state. Is it doing proper MFA handling? Is it doing proper like data sanitization? Is it doing proper storage of like local encryption and things of that nature? Like those to me are just an extension of controls, which is another form of compliance. And how do I gain confidence that this application is designed in a way and operates in a way that adheres to those controls that you're pen testing? So I would just either write up like the physical documentation. Of course, I would love to get into more of a like a policy and status code thing so we can always have some type of continuous assessment. But all of that to me feeds into my ability as a security leader to understand the security state of applications because of our ability to do whether it's automated or platform control pen testing that provides evidence of something happening or not. So those evidence are part of the compliance controls that you would sort of capture, saying like, hey, the idea of continuous control state through activities such as pen testing allows us to gain confidence on the security controls that we have deployed. We can understand the different coverages. We can understand when incidents happen on systems that don't have those controls, how come we didn't put those controls on there? So we have our incident history data combined with our pen testing data to understand the state of a software application or system design. All of those things put together in the right narrative is where I think the GRC plus A components come up. And sometimes as a pen tester, you may just be thinking about like, I'm just trying to break this thing.
Right.
And as the GRC plus A, it's like, I want you to break this thing, but I need you to enumerate what are the things that you expected to be there that were not, because then we would take that as the control set for which we would say like our compliance framework for applications, these are the things that are available. We would like to see this. So literally you have your playbook that you already do, just reverse it backwards and tell us, and then we already have that. And then each time you can then measure the different types of programs and what's happening in terms of their control state and say, okay, this vendor, we normally get like this type of coverage because these are the controls we know that they have. Or if we're building something internally, we can say, hey, if you build stuff with these things in mind, or we are providing shared services that you can interface with and you get those coverages by default from a security team, this is what you get. All that, once again, to me, I look at it as a form of governance, compliance, and assurance.
Damn. Oh, yeah. Look, well, before the show, I went on Instagram and I said he's going to be dropping a bunch of gems, and you do not disappoint, sir. But so we're going to come back, and I have a couple other questions because I feel like there's a deeper thing when we go into what you're talking about as far as knowing the other things and how they translate to each other, and it's going to go into a conversation about mentorship and stuff like that. But before we do, I do have to shout out our affiliate link for this week and the last few weeks. So NordVPN. So shout out to them, and we're going to play this quick 30-second clip, and then we'll be right back.
Stuck at home? Make the most of the internet with NordVPN. As you're trying out new apps to save you from boredom, NordVPN will make sure that your data is always protected. And you can still travel, well, virtually, by connecting to VPN servers in almost 60 countries. Up for a new gaming challenge? Make sure that cyber threats don't get in your way. Feeling curious? Access the news from all over the world firsthand. Get the app now. NordVPN. Online security starts with a click.
All right. Thank you to NordVPN. So again, if you click that link, I'm not sure if the percentage is still 63. It jumps. It's anywhere between 59 and 68% off for a 2-year subscription. But when you do click that link, I hope you click that link if you are wanting to get a VPN service, because when you do, it does help out the show. We do get a small commission small commission, but it does go to kind of keeping this show independent. So again, shout out to Nord and shout out to everybody who has been clicking the link and purchasing things with it. So again, we are back with Charles Nwatu. This is InfoSec Unplugged, and if you missed out so far, you are missing some gems. Charles is definitely breaking it down and making me feel like I can go out here and go run a security team from my pen testing chair. So, but one thing before we go into that, one thing that I hear, and of course, you're going to be biased with the answer anyway. But one thing that I hear is that Netflix has probably the best application security or cybersecurity program out there, right? Everybody that I've talked to that's either come from there or who have like in-depth knowledge of there is like nobody. There aren't too many other companies that touches Netflix's cybersecurity. And honestly, with the knowledge that you're dropping, I can see how. But of course, I know you're going to probably say it anyway. But is it true that Netflix is basically top tier with the cybersecurity? And if so, which you're probably going to say yes, how, in Europe, in your own opinion, how is it that they stay above the rest? They stay above the rest of the competition, right? Because everybody wants their cybersecurity program to be the best, but whether it's budgets or executives that don't know any better, or are just completely out of tune or out of touch, inexperienced people or not retaining the right talent, no one's program is ever really good all the time. But Netflix's reputation seems to always be like above and beyond.
Well, so I appreciate the kind words because I know this is more of a journey of the history of just the work that's happened within the Netflix security team. And, I express humility in the fact that, I think every organization strives to have that level of perfection and what they can do with what they have. And I think, hiring is a big deal in terms of giving people the opportunity to explore in those spaces and come up with novel ideas or refocus on some of the basic things. I think personally, I think about, how do you do less better? That's been my personal focus. It's like, how do I do more with less and really figure out what are the things that we can focus on and drive the appropriate change. With regards to just application security in general, I think that the way I think about it is that, every company, every group is striving to be the best with what they have, with what they got, and with their resources. I think it's just providing an environment that allows folks, to test themselves, to press the limits, to understand what's feasible, what's possible, and then from there, there's the talks or the conferences and the outpouring of the community engagement and support that comes with that. And I think just the reputation sort of builds over time. Of course, we want to maintain and do what is appropriate and needful for the business. But I would say just like the personal view I would express is that I think any organization is trying to field and put together the best team possible with the resources and access that they have.
Yeah, I mean, I love the answer and I love the neutrality, but yeah, it's still a flex though. So. So, but again, like I said, congratulations to the Netflix team for, finding the talent, retaining the talent. And then, like I said, congratulations to you for being a part of that. Because, no matter how great the team, no team is as good as their, is only as good as their workers. So again, that's definitely one of the reputations. Like I remember when I was working AppSec for a company a while back, and I was like, my goal is to get this company's cybersecurity reputation to that of Netflix. Didn't work out that way. Ended up leaving, but it wasn't my fault. It wasn't cybersecurity's fault. We did a damn good job. So, this whatever. But anyway, so Charles, earlier we were talking about, transitioning from something like a pen testing or transitioning from one of these other siloed positions and making a move into whether it's GRC or GRC plus A, as you put it, or even let's say you want to move from offensive to defensive, or you want to move, like a pen test to IR or something like that. But how you explained it by saying, having that knowledge and basically being able to transfer that knowledge or transfer that skills of knowing how vulnerabilities work, or learning how, knowing how to exploit certain machines and making those into controls. I feel like, one, that's brilliant, and that is something that is super needed, because a lot of people, especially when we first started in cybersecurity back, however, whatever, it was literally like, nope, you're a hacker, you're red team, you're blue team. Just the concept of purple teams is still fairly new, even though internally we were floating these ideas. I remember back in 2015, 2016, I was floating the idea of the concept of a purple team, and I literally got like laughed out of the room, right? And it was like, okay, and now here it is, it's like purple team. I'm like, oh, y'all just put a name on it. But this is literally what I was saying, like, let's put red and blue, let's put the red team and the blue team together and work together, instead of having this, this rivalry. But I think that goes to the lack of proper training, right? Because again, when you go through these courses, or you go through these boot camps, or whatever the case may be, they're literally just kind of telling you how to do what you need to do to essentially get the job, or to be good at one job, right? No one's taking the time to say, these, like you said, these exploits or these vulnerabilities can then be transferred into controls when dealing with governance, risk, and compliance. It's basically, we're only taught, find a vulnerability, exploit the vulnerability, write the report, let them deal with it. There's that almost that intercommunication element is missing, and I feel like we need to find a way to get to that, right? Improve that. So I know another thing you like to do is, help other people, navigate through their career, or get into tech or cybersecurity. What are you telling them when you're mentoring or helping them? Are you kind of giving them those gems like that to kind of do that, or is it still, unfortunately, still kind of like a siloed thing?
No, so hopefully the gems will keep coming, and I'll let the audience decide that. I would say, when it comes to like the transition with regards to like getting into cybersecurity, like, I personally, like, my experience, the reason why I love incident response is I call it like the octopus model, with like the incident response individual at the center. And you get to touch a little bit of AppSec, you get to touch a little bit of endpoint, you get to touch a little bit of log management, you get to touch a little bit of maybe even some compliance with PCI. Like the IR SOC experience to me was like the eye-opening of all the different dimensions within security. The security umbrella is big. Like, there are many like different types of verticals under the security umbrella, and sort of finding your path through that can be challenging. Maybe you're not the greatest exploit finder, but maybe you have a knack at looking at like incidents and trailing and analytics on data about incidents. So I always love the fact of coming in from like an incident response or SOC, but I would tell people not to, like, my advice would not to get stuck there, because I think there's this tendency for businesses to sort of look at the SOC as the entry level into security, but not as a way to expand the breadth and scope of the individuals in those roles. Because going back to my octopus model, as an incident responder, like, you get to see a lot of the incidents about the things that are not going well in the business from a security or sometimes operational side of the house. Like, each of those incidents are distinct learnings that can potentially help shape your thinking of security or operational effectiveness for the business. And when it comes to me, like, how do I transition that to helping others? I try to talk about like my experiences and what works for us. And I see someone in the chat talked about the T shape versus L shape, and there's even an E shape in terms of like the types of T-shirts sizing we put on. Then I'll follow up on that, the generalist versus specialist mentality. There was a saying I used to say when I was hiring for in the corporate security space, like, I want a generalist specialist. And it's also sort of like an oxymoron. Like, no, I need someone that has like general like their specialty is the fact that they're a general understanding of all the things.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird thing to say because, as a generalist, a little things, but that's the specialist part of it, is that a little of all these things, and you can flex accordingly, and then you build a team to flex off all those different dimensions of the individuals on the team. So that whole concept of generalist versus specialist is a thing, and then the different types of models from the T shape, L shape, E shape are really real things. But when it comes to like the mentorship, I'm a big advocate of getting people in the cyber domain. One, because I think it's I'll start with the leading thing. Sometimes financially is one of the biggest things I think can help some of the dynamics in terms of equitable fairness with regards to just living. It can be a real great economic booster for folks in terms of like salary and take home. So that's one thing.
Yep.
And then mentorship, being able to, how do you navigate once you're in your career? How do I go from the entry level to the mid career to the senior to leader to maybe head of, deputy, CISO, executive, venture capitalist, angel? Like there are so many different steps within the journey. And to be quite frank, like I don't have many peers that I know that sort of have gone through the different phases. Like I think I've met caps where we're like, yeah, well, either at senior levels or leadership levels. But I also want to find like, okay, who are the folks that have been there before me that can help share some of that knowledge? Because I think mentorship goes both ways. Like I love mentoring the new crops and sponsoring folks that are coming up. But I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I know I want to be poured into just as much as the other individual. And like there's this great kids book, Who Filled My Bucket. And sometimes, I need someone to just fill in my bucket as I'm filling into other folks. And I know, like you said, you're just hitting 40. I'm about to hit 40 this year too. So it's like, okay, we're at this weird stage in our lives where it's like what does next look like, and how does mentorship show up? Not just from the folks we've mentored that are coming out of college or alternative pathways to education and things like that, but then like what does that look like for senior leadership, executive leadership, head of security roles, executive roles? Like what does that pathway look like, and who's guiding potentially this crop to help guide the next crop that's behind us, because it is a layered approach. So those are some of the things that I've been thinking about. I've been talking to one of my good friends, Rob Duhart and Chris Cochran, about this type of stuff. Like it is top of mind for me, because as a leader in security, or as a Black management leader in security, like I do feel a level of responsibility to continue to drive and show the pathway. As my mom would tell me, I want to walk the path unbothered, but someone has to clear the path first. So that means I have to clear the path. All right, I'll clear the path, but hopefully the folks who are walking behind me can walk unobstructed, because that would be my goal.
You said you didn't know if you were the next gem was gonna drop. So I'm actually gonna play from Sonic the Hedgehog when you get the Chaos Gem. So there you go. One, I mean, there's a lot to digest there, but before I do that, I'm trying to we try to keep the chat separate because of the new concept with the show, but I did have to shout out that one of our panelists from when we did a panel a couple months ago, Mary Galloway, said she is on a cruise right now, and she got on the show to see you. So
what's up?
So yeah. So shout out to Mary. And then you also have Kalila Scott, who's a fellow GRC GRC head in here. So you got someone team GRC, and it looks like you have another one, Tam on YouTube, is basically saying that with the generalist versus specialist and stuff, that people don't like to have that conversation. I guess so. My first question would be why do you think people don't like to have that conversation? And then we're gonna get into the whole age thing, because boy, let me tell you something. I have been, how they have a midlife crisis. I feel like I'm going through like a mid-career crisis right now, right? So, but answer that. Why is it that companies or people hate to have that conversation about that generalist versus specialist, or basically pouring into someone and building them up?
I would say that from my experience is that it's an intentional action of commitment. And when you have to be intentional in that way, my experience has been you're expecting an outcome. If you're expecting an outcome, that means you're highly invested for this going well. The care, the nurturing, the feeding, the support, the motivation that goes into that can be potentially a high touch, high expensive transaction. That just doesn't happen, in my experience, naturally. Like it's a collective effort. Like, they always say, build your group, build your squad.
Yep.
Like part of that squad, you're going to have different. Well, my experience, what I'm hoping to build is that my squad is from different levels. I know I have a cohort of youngsters. I got them. Like I got a good, strong cohort of youngsters.
Right.
It's like that mid-career to that executive sizzle cohort that I'm still trying to find my way through with regards to like how do I take that information and then apply it to helping others. We talk about like the mentorship, but then like I'm also a big component of like sponsorship. Like as a hiring manager, how do I get the folks into the places where they need to be? How do I help build some of those connections to help them get to those places? And it's not easy. And there is this, in my experience, this protection of self versus the larger good. And what are you willing to sacrifice and put on the table when those tough decisions come? Because when this is really keeping it real, when your bread or my bread is at stake, people may tend to act differently.
Right.
Just putting it out there. So then it's like, is there a risk reward here element? Is it selective gatekeeping, as people will say? And I'm all about, hey, I want all people to get the bags. I want you, whatever bag you want to carry, I want you all to get the bag.
Talk about
now, the path to get there may be different, but at least I want you to have the option to get the bag. And that may require relationship building. And I'll say this personally, it's about trust and vulnerability. That's the reason why you and I, we can have this conversation, because there's some things we've talked about behind the scenes that we can bring on camera. We got mutual friends that we both know, like some of the journeys and the stories. We got friends even on the chat that we can go and talk to. But that's been built because we've provided ourselves an opportunity and a space to open up on things that may be taboo publicly on a live stream, but we have to do it in some form, because if not us in those spaces, then who's going to do that work? And I know it's very cliche, but I do feel a personal responsibility on some of these things to say, okay, I'll risk my neck. I got to in some cases, because I know that there's something more than beyond me. But people understand that there's sometimes a cost in doing that type of behavior and activity. That's all I got to say about that.
No, but you spot on with it, because the funny thing is, going back to what I was just saying about this crisis that I've been dealing with, right? And I think now that when I kind of reflect, I think that's what kind of caused me to start this.
I saw that
was because for the last 3, maybe 4 years, right? To your point, you start off and you're going, I got to do this, but I can't affect my bread, right? I can't. I want to help you, but I'm not in a place to fumble my bag to do that, right? And then over the course of the last 3-4 years, I got to a point where I was going, I'm secure enough in my position where now I feel like I'm able to step out and take these risks, like you said, put my neck on the line a little bit, take the heat for others, right? And that's just, for me, that's a sign of natural leadership, where it's kind of like, you need to stand up for your people, right? You need to stand up for your tribe. You need to stand up for your pack, right? Like we're here.
Can I interject real quick on that?
Yes, sir.
Like even us talking and saying, take the heat and stick our necks out, even that represents a negative connotation.
It is. It does.
Like, and that's I'll be transparent. Like I don't even know what that feels like, but even just hearing us replay that back in my mind, it's like the idea that we think about it as sticking my neck out, like the connotation is that it's negative. Like, well, is it about me like lifting someone else up? Is that how I think about
or is it because you're going against the grain, right? Because now what happens in doing that, the reason why, for example, the reason why, and I speak from experience, the reason why you say I stick my neck out is because now you go from being let's say you go from being a model employee to now all of a sudden you're difficult to work with just because you had a disagreement, just because you didn't quite see it how someone else saw it, and you actually had the guts to say, I feel like this is wrong. I feel like we should do this differently, right? And if you have upper management who's not receptive to that, that's where the putting your neck on the line is, because now it's almost like a how dare you question my authority type thing. Ego gets in the way, right? And to the point here where when I wanted to start doing certain things with mentoring and whatever, you have all these people who say, like you were saying, everybody says it, but no one's really doing it. Right. So when you have these, I'm like, I want to do things. I want to help people. I want to help people be able to change their lives and not necessarily have to worry about the traditional, I need to go to college. I need to do this. I need to do that. I'm not college educated. Right. I came from the military, came home, lost my path and got into tech. I stumbled into it, so to speak. Right. But I know there are a lot of people out there who are just like me, who are probably smarter than me and don't know that this is an avenue for them. And I pitched this to people. I pitched this around and everybody was like, sounds great. Yes, let's do it. And as soon as it came time to put your foot on the gas, you said, right. And I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to name organizations, but it got to a point where it was, you know what? I'm always on here telling people, bet on yourself, walk your path. It can be us. It has to be us. We have, like you said, someone has to clear that path. Okay, so now I'm going to do that. I'm going to put my own bread up and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to start young. And yes, I'm doing things. Yes, it's a video game thing, but that's just one pillar. We're not talking about from that pillar. Now I get to go into the schools. From that pillar, I can introduce other people in the gaming industry who work in security. You know what I'm saying? And now it's giving them something because, again, this was literally where I started tinkering and messing with stuff and playing video games in a safe space. And then to your second point about having those conversations about vulnerability, we're able to have that because it's a give and receive, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You feel comfortable being vulnerable talking to me because I'm also comfortable being vulnerable and speaking with you. Unfortunately, there's not enough of that because it's almost like everybody has to walk around with this facade like they're the best, they're the greatest, they're this, they're that, and no one can say, hey, nah, actually I don't know this, or actually, you know what, I'm not that great. To date, my best blog I've ever written was a blog where I talked about how I failed. You know what I'm saying? And it was and why? Because I had the guts to sit here and say, nah, I didn't do what I was supposed to do. Nah, I let my imposter syndrome kick my ass. Nah, I set unrealistic expectations for myself. And this is what happened. My health suffered. My mental health suffered. My physical health suffered. You know what I'm saying? But I put it out there and I put it out for the world to read.
I mean, now let me unpack some of the gems you were dropping. There you go. I made a little selfie. There's a saying I say on my team, like, we're planting seeds.
Yes.
And anyone that's in the gardening space, you plant seeds, but you got to nurture them, you got to water them, you got to talk to them, you got to support them, and they don't grow overnight. Like, these are long-term investments that when they do take hold, you're like, okay, like, I know how much work went into doing that right there. Mm-hmm. And I got to commend you in the work, because I saw the social media posts about the gaming and everything else that was happening. I got to call that out, because to me, I see it as planting seeds. You plant many seeds and see how they grow. You see how they take root. You see how they respond to the work that you're doing. So I wanted to call that out. So that's part of helping others navigate in this field. And to the broader point about failure, there is a great book by Matthew, I think it's Syed, about failure. Like, I think failure is the greatest learning opportunity if we allow folks to fail in a way that they can learn.
Yes.
If failure is used as a tool to as a disciplinary action or to create an environment of fear, then the creativity of trying to solve problems or approach problems is reduced to fear of, I don't want to F up.
Yeah.
And that way may be limiting for an individual, which will then compound potentially the imposter syndrome, which then you're not even operating at a condition, and then you just tighten up, and then the anxiety, and then you're like, okay, then you're out.
Yeah.
Like I want to promote environments where people can decide how they want to show up and be the best version of themselves that day.
Love
And
it.
if that means that's one extra step in the process, that's one extra step in the process. So that's the mentality I think about, like helping others by also providing them the environment for which to allow themselves to show up the best way they can.
Yeah. You lead through empowerment, right? Like ever since I've taken over teams, when I run a team, I empower my people, right? I don't tell them that this is how it has to be. When we're on a pen test, everybody's fear is, oh gosh, I don't want to listen. Here's the scope. Here's the rules of engagement. If you see something interesting, go for it. Let me know what the play is. And let me be the final one to say, nah, that might cause a denial of service condition, right? But what am I doing in that situation? I'm letting them now use their creativity, right? I'm empowering them to go for it. Like I don't care what it says in the book. I don't care what it says on the paper. If your gut goes with something and you have the evidence to go with it, go for it. You know what I'm saying? And then to your point about making mistakes and failing forward, one thing that I actually brought from home to the workplace is how I talk to my family, how I talk to my kids. My kids will tell you, I tell them, it's not how you mess up, it's how you recover, right? If you mess up, cool. What did you learn from that mistake? Okay, so now how are you planning to move forward? Now, if you continue to make the same mistake over and over and over again, then we're going to have a talk, because now we've already established, you messed up, or I'm going to tell you where you messed up. We're going to acknowledge it, come to an agreement. Maybe we agree to disagree, but now, moving forward, maybe I should do it a little differently. Now, if you continue to do the same thing, it's just like how they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, hoping for a different outcome. That's where that comes in and goes, okay. But I brought that with my team now, where it's like, all right, cool. After every test, after every assessment, we have a lessons learned meeting. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? What do you think you need to improve on now? But what do you think I did right? What do you think I did wrong? Where do I need to improve to better help you? Right? I just had one of my goal setting meetings, and I said my goal setting meeting is to identify the strengths and weaknesses of my team. But also I need to better identify the weaknesses in myself to better lead my team to be, you know what I'm saying? So again, you pour into each other and you empower each other to be like you said, be the best versions of yourself. So, all right, that was a bit heavy, but we're going to get into, like I said, so we're going to lighten it up and then we're going to wrap up. So someone did ask, and I'm going to put it in here, that they were saying, Netflix has just formed an AppSec reviews and assessments team. What advice would you give to someone who wants to get into AppSec?
I would say that AppSec is probably my least known domain. I'll lead with that clearing. But I think something that you mentioned earlier, like understanding the techniques that would either circumvent some of like, maybe this old school, I don't know if this is still used, but like the OWASP top 10 type of methodologies. Like I know there are principles in terms of how they think about those things and understanding how those apply to various architecture designs, whether that's from the front end, back end, the different data stores and how that all plays into it. Like just being the ability to articulate and capture what that process is, from an exploit development, or even just assessing the state of the thing. So it shows understanding around the material. Like, and I know depending on the level of where you're at in your career, like think of craftsmanship. Like craftsmanship, it's a love, the body, the sweat and tears that goes into your field. So if you're able to sort of explain it, walk through it, demonstrate your thinking process around it, I think those are high qualities, once again, to sort of expand what you're trying to demonstrate to someone. Okay.
All right. So thank you for that. And then from one that you said you're not super strong with to one that you are strong with, what GRC certs would you recommend?
Well, I'm going to be honest. I didn't even know there are GRC certs. I'm self-taught, and I've just been reading books. What I focused on primarily was risk quantification and learning about the FAIR modeling, and just modeling risk in general. So that's one body of knowledge I've been looking at. When it comes to compliance, I've been looking at, well, how do you integrate more of the engineering elements into compliance-based things? So how do we do compliance as code, policy as code type of infrastructure? With regards to governance, governance is tricky because you have to have the organization to support policy standards and writing those things. And then I think one of the ways that I'm trying to be different about the GRC work is on the governance side is how do you map what's actually happening to governance so that there's a real clear direct correlation. Like when we say this thing, it shows up in the business this way, and these are the activities that you would see, and here's the data that supports our position, therefore leading us with some level of confidence of our investments more broadly. Because in some organizations, when you say governance, it's just like, oh, you guys just do policies and that's it. Well, policies is part of it, but I want the policies to be actionable, that engineers and the business can understand what they're doing, how their work shows up in those policy statements, because it is a connection. Like we have to be able to connect these things together. If not, we're just creating work for the sake of work, and that's not in the business I'm in.
Fair enough. Okay. So now we're going to change gears a little bit with the last two questions.
Okay.
So when you're not leading and dropping gems and basically learning more about, about being great at your job. I know you talked about, being a music lover, but what are some of your other hobbies?
So I like finding music. I like collecting music. I like listening to music loudly, and I like driving fast cars fast, and I like driving fast cars listening to music loudly. So like I thoroughly just love music. I love everything about it. I'm also a family man. I love being with my family. I love being with my close friends. I love seeing the people around me like do well, and I like to sort of support them where I can. I like to operate like the silent hand. I don't really like to be in front of the spotlight, but I do love to be able to be behind the scenes and like helping people get to where they need to get to and supporting them on their journey.
Nice. You have a favorite car in mind that you like to drive fast?
Yes, I love the Alpina 2007 B7.
I'm gonna have to look that one up. I'm gonna have
It's
to look that one up.
One of my favorites.
Look, that sound fancy. Oh no, it's like okay. So it's a BMW.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not just. It's not just.
A B. My apologies.
Thank you. I gotta hold you accountable now.
Put some respect on the name. I'm sorry. My fault. All right. So one, let me say, it's been 2 years, but honestly, it was definitely worth the wait, man. Like this has been a great conversation. But before I let you go,
Yes, sir.
last question: what is your why?
What is my why? What is my why? Like why I do this, or just why in general?
It could be why you do this, and in general. Go. What is your why?
So, one of the things that my wife and I have talked about with regards in terms of representation is, being in the position, doing the job well, looking good at both in paper and how you execute in real life. And my why is to set an example. I made a comment earlier before, clear the path so I can walk behind unobstructed. And if that means I have to clear the path, I'll clear the path so the folks behind me can walk unobstructed. And for the folks that have cleared the path before me, I want to make sure I'm doing the best to keep the path clear so that the next folks behind me can walk. And that just drives me every day to wake up, be committed to my work, to demonstrate my work to my peers, to demonstrate the work to myself, to my family, my peers. And that just drives an internal desire and fire to sort of promote that level of work and engagement, and then also make a path and bring the folks that are of coming behind as a pull them up with me on this journey. So my why is like, I just want to advance the movement of cybersecurity. I want to advance more African Americans, Latinos, Latinas into the space because it is a difference maker when it comes to the whole concept of wealth creation and financial gains and opportunities, like cyber and tech in general. Or I'm not saying it's the only way, but it's a damn good way to get there.
Hold on, we about to do all the damn sounds. Hold on, we gonna.
I got the extra 1-ups.
And had to end it with the contra. Nah, man, that I love it. I love that answer. I see my wife is also in here talking about she also loves that answer. But that's, like I said, that's super important, man. Again, representation matters, and leading, leading that path and clearing the path for others. I love it. Sir. Thank you so much. Like I said, we have to do this again sometime. Don't let it be another 2 years. Until then, why don't you tell the people how to find you?
Yeah, if you want to get a hold of me, I think the two best places are LinkedIn and Twitter. My Twitter is at Charles_NWATU. And then LinkedIn is Charles Nwatu NWATU. One of the commitments I usually make with folks is like, if you make the time, I'll make the time. So even if it's just a quick check-in, hey, I can do a quick check-in. But definitely looking forward to connecting with folks. And I love the fact that I would love to see more family units, like, nothing against the single folks and everything else, but hey, if you're in the Bay Area, want to mingle and meet, like, hey, I'm always open to doing that. And it shouldn't be another 2 years for us to do this again. I would love to see broader even panels where we can just talk even more outside of just security, but like what makes us who we are and how did we get to this point and what keeps us going from just Black men in this space, but also married men in this space and everything in between.
Yeah. Oh, well, like I said, stay tuned because I got some things cooking. And again, not only was my wife saying she loves it, my mom is also in the chat and she also approves. So now you got from both the women in my life. Only one that's missing is my daughter. But
hey, I'm trying to do my best. I'm trying to represent out here.
But yeah, man, like I said, thank you to the pack. But Charles, thank you. Like I said, we're definitely gonna get in touch and do this again. Get another panel. You know what? If you're down here in Georgia, especially with the center opening up, I totally plan on doing little talks and panels and stuff from the center. Have our own little conference in a 1,400 square foot space. But so what? It might not be Vegas, but whatever. We'll make it happen.
I'll make this commitment right here, right now. You send me the day and time, I'll go out there.
Boom. All right, there. All right, so then there it is. All right, cool. So then we're gonna do that again right there. That's what it is. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, everybody watching, this has been another episode of InfoSec Unplugged. This has been my guest, Charles Nwatu. We're gonna give him another round of applause. Thank you to everybody watching on YouTube, Twitch, and LinkedIn. And if you're wondering how I'm doing that, is because I am using this app called Restream. So go on and hit restream.io/djax. Again, click the link. If you join with them, I do get something to help the show. And also, make sure you like, follow, and subscribe so you can follow Charles on his platforms. But also make sure you follow me at Alpha Cybersecurity on YouTube, InfoSec Unplugged on YouTube, and also the brand new Alpha Esports and Tech on YouTube. So it's Alpha Esports Tech because they won't let me say the whole thing. We're gonna have a lot of stuff coming up, and we're gonna, hopefully shock the world with what we're bringing. So again, everybody, thank you for joining. Make sure you tune in next week. Charles, enjoy. I know you got a lot of stuff going on, so I will see you then. Oh. One last thing, if you want to support, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/djax. Definitely need the coffee. But yeah, again, I make sure y'all tune in next week. I will see y'all then. Charles, like I said, let's link up, man, and we'll make this happen.
Most definitely.
All right, y'all. Be easy, be safe, and have a good weekend.